Hi, this is Jeff. Welcome to the 10X Candidate Experience. This is episode number 1, and we are really excited to be launching this brand new podcast. My first guest is truly one of a small handful of thought leaders in the employer branding space. Before falling in love with the art and craft of employer branding, he was a digital marketer with 15 years experience in how audiences think and behave online. Since then, he's taken those skills to becoming one of employer branding's leading voices and practitioners. He's also the author of 2 books, with a third coming out really soon: Employer Branding, Talent Chooses You, and the Employer Branding Handbook Volume 1. Volume 2 should be coming out soon. In his career, he's been working with dozens of brands from companies of every size and shape like Disney, Target, Regeneron, and many others. As an in-house practitioner, he transformed Groupon's employer brand, and we are very excited to have James Ellis, the employer branding nerd, on the show. So James, welcome to the 10X Candidate Experience.
Hey, Jeff. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
So I've been reading a lot of your stuff. I read pretty much all your books. I haven't read the last volume 2 yet, but
hasn't come out yet. Don't worry. That was like a good idea. I was like, I'm going to get to that. And then life, I don't know, anything happened to us about 18 months ago where life just kind of went, well, yeah, any plans you may or may not have had, throw them out the window. So it's not a thing yet.
Okay. So it definitely will be a thing.
So you're caught up. You're caught up. You're all set.
Okay. So before I typically schedule any recording session with guests like yourself, I typically have a 10 or 15 minute conversation with them to discuss topics and ideas, just like you and I did. And we had a great conversation that probably could have gone on for hours, right? I wish we had been recording that session, but you were pretty much open to anything. You were very transparent. So I'm really thankful for you joining us today. I'm hoping we can provide a lot of that passion and transparency, because I think the audience is really looking for that, right?
I only promise passion and transparency. I can't promise expertise and skill per se. Knowledge and wisdom may be far out of reach, but I will definitely take passion and transparency.
You are far too humble, my friend.
Okay, trust me, it's better this way. It's better if I go the humble route. The absolute egomaniac in me is going, shut up, say the thing. You're like, no one will like us then.
I'll try and balance you out then.
There's a long line of people who want that job.
When companies first start building their employer brand, they usually start off by asking like questions from their internal employees, hey, why do you work here? Things like that. They do the internal research so they can develop some kind of internal expression of their employer brand. Yep. What are some of the ways that companies can create an outward expression of all that research that they just spent months and months doing and spent probably hundreds of thousands of dollars creating?
Yeah, that is really the surprising part, is how much work and how expensive it can be to do that kind of research, to really get into to do it right? Too many companies, I think, go the other way, where they kind of go, we put a survey and they said they love it. And so we'll just say, everybody, hey, people love working here. And we're all done. But let's be fair, that doesn't work. But if you do it right, it does take effort. It does take some time. It does take some research. We could flip things around relatively quickly, but they were small companies. Like, you're trying to think about, how do I define all of Western civilization, right? If you're trying to define, and I'm picking a company, massive company I can think of at random, GM, it's like, hey, all these different divisions, all the different locations, what is the distillation of what they are? That's some work. That is the distillation of Western Civ. I was dealing with a company that was less than 100 people. It's a whole different thing. But when you do it, first off, most companies do it wrong, in that they're looking for what's great. And they're so focused on, hey, give me something positive. Give me something nice. I just want to say something positive. I just want to say something that makes me feel good, that I'm a good employer, that I'm doing my job, and I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And they're so overly focused on digging up the good that they don't realize the value of saying, here's the good, but also here's the bad. Because the things they're describing are called jobs, and none of us do these things called jobs for free. None of these things are fun. They are all work. And as much as many of us, and some days I add myself to that list, we love our jobs, it's still work. It's still hard. It's still parts of it that are a pain in the butt. There's still parts that are negative. And if you don't think about the negative, if you just think about the positive, what you end up is this kind of mealy mouth, blah, 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 Hallmark greeting card, fortune cookie of we're a great place to work, or people love it here. Or if you don't come up with a framework that says, look, dig deeper beyond people like to work here. What's the Toyota 5 whys kind of model? Okay, why do you love working here? Why do you think that's interesting? Why do you think that's what? Dive deeper. If you can't connect that to a kind of a framework of, and you can see all sorts of different, my personal one is all about internal intrinsic motivations. Like some people want status, some people want comfort, some people want to be, opportunity, some people want to be rewarded. There's about 8 or 9 of those, depending on which format you use, and take a psychology class. It's all right there. And you connect that dot to say, hey, if you're looking for opportunity, this is where you get opportunity. And this is the shape that opportunity takes. And so if you do that right, it does take work. It does take time. It does take kicking that tire around a lot to say, okay, what shape does that make sense in? That is the hard part, but it's only the beginning of it. To me, it's not that it's all downhill after that, but there is a long tail of thought and process and work that has to happen. If you take that idea, if you distill it, it's not just about quick, put it on a sticker and slap it on every laptop, done. It's not about that. It's about saying, think of, and these are my favorite examples, your sales team and your legal team. You got your sales team who is, they're risk driven. They damn the torpedoes. They're going to bend some rules. They're going to push the boundaries. They're going to push the envelope. And the culture is push, 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 make that sale, make that sale. And then you've got the legal team where none of that is true, where in fact, it is the converse, the absolute opposite of those things. And yet somehow there's a sales team in your office and there's a legal team in your office, and you just have to define a brand that defines them both, which sounds impossible, which it kind of is, but it also kind of isn't, because a brand is not a monolithic idea. It's not like, boom, like Amazon's a good one, because Amazon's actually semi-public. It's we pioneer. Boom, that's it. But it's 2 words. It's we and pioneer. And we's obvious because that's who we are. But pioneer is the interesting verb that you say, okay, that's just the beginning of a sentence. We pioneer in sales, thusly. We pioneer in data storage, thusly. We pioneer in e-commerce, thusly. We pioneer in robotic, this way. They can even take it to their legal team. Their legal team is pioneering in ways that I don't understand because I'm not a lawyer. So it's about, how do you take that expression of a brand and localize it so that each team, each office, and in the best case scenario, each individual goes, yeah, I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to make it mine. Like you think of like good literature, and I'm not trying to equate employer branding and literature in any way, shape, or form, but you look at like Catcher in the Rye, and I swear I've read that thing 3 times. I think it's 3 different books. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh, this is a book about some guy who's angry. And then 5 years later, you read it, you go, oh, this is a book about a guy who's angry, who hates that he's angry, and he's struggling with that. And you read it 5 years later, I go, oh, this is a guy who's angry, he hates that he's angry, and he understands that his only salvation is through helping others. And I bet if I read it today, I'd be like, what book is this? I never read this before. You bring to it what you bring to it. The book didn't change. I changed, and how I perceived it, and how I absorbed it, and how I internalized it, and brought it to life in my own mind. The brand is the same way. How your legal team is going to express that brand, how your sales team is going to express that brand, is completely functional, contextual to them. So you have to figure out, and this is where the job gets real fun. You have to come up with this umbrella idea that allows for ladders to each of these very disparate, don't talk to each other half the time, don't even like each other teams, and say, yes, you're part of the same company. In what way is that possible? That's really where things get fun. You have to figure out, how do you put yourself in the shoes of a legal team? And I have the least legal mind of ever. Every time I deal with legal, I'm like, oh, terrified. I'm sure someone's getting sued and it's going to be me. It's just fear driven, but I have to put myself in their shoes and say, okay, relative to their options of other legal jobs and other legal environments they might work in, how is this place interesting? And then you do that ad infinitum across every team, every office, every location, every kind of microculture. That's what it's about. And that takes a lot of work.
You take the survey results, if you will, and kind of the next step would be to
connect
segment down into different populations in your organization, and then kind of model it about what they're, try and fit them, those square pegs into those round holes as much as you can, right?
Yeah. And in a way that says all of these pegs are the same color, or all these pegs have the same, like there's got to be some sort of connective tissue that says, look, Sales team's going to do what a sales team's done. Legal team's going to do what a legal team does. But how do you connect it to this larger idea so that, and this is kind of where the fun, where it gets interesting, you build a brand new team. You suddenly say, machine learning is a thing, and you build this brand new team. This thing existed after you built this survey. So it can't be part of the survey. So it can't be connected. So you have to find a way to extend the brand to them and say, look, in a machine learning kind of world, this is the way our brand lives and breathes and works inside that space. Then you ask them, how do you express that to the world?
All right. So the most common expression that I see are job descriptions.
Yeah.
How effective do you think are job descriptions at expressing that employer brand?
Oh, wow. I'm trying to decide how nice and how not nice to be. Look, job descriptions.
Nasty.
Yeah. Well, first off, let's stop calling them job descriptions, because job descriptions are this thing called legal documents. And I don't mess with legal documents. Like I said, not a legal brain, not a legal mind. And I think every time I try and dip my little toe into legal spaces, I get in trouble and slapped and sued. Never been sued, thank God. Those are legal documents. They're there to say you must be able to lift 50 pounds. You must own a car. You must work in an office environment where this is a warehouse. So you need to blah, blah, blah. They're legal documents and they're written thusly, right? No one goes and says, ooh, a job description. I'm going to go to bed and read this job description. It's such like literature. No one says that because they're legal documents, right? No one looks at their contract or their mortgage, right? When they look at, this is good language. They're written thusly. They're written the same way. They're not there to be interesting. They're there to document for legal purposes what this job is, which is nuts, because a job is not a thing. A job is an output, an outcome. You don't hire a salesperson to say, okay, your job is to make 47 phone calls every single day, and you have to document every single call in Salesforce every single day, and you have to track where each lead is every single day. That's not your job. That's the thing you do to do your job, which is make money, bring the money in. Now, if we say your job is to do these phone calls, that job shifts like that. And it limits what that job can be. Suddenly you have to get the master of knows what a phone is and can master the pitter patter and that conversation, that repartee of, hey, you don't know me, but I'm going to sell you this pen, right? It's all Wolf of Wall Street bullshit, right? It's all that junk. But if the job is actually to make money, well, why not write a book? Why not make a video series? Why not start a podcast? Why not build a social media channel that talks about the value of this thing? If you say that's what the job is, the job doesn't really work. But if you say the job is really to create this outcome, you ask people to say, how will you create this outcome? And suddenly you can hire writers as salespeople. You can hire videographers as salespeople. You can hire storytellers as salespeople and content marketers as salespeople and advertisers as salespeople. They're all salespeople. They can be salespeople because their job is to bring the money in. So that means the job description as written doesn't make any sense because it's not real. It's like trying to draw a running cat. There's no way to be accurate about it because it doesn't stand still for more than half a second. So what these are, in fact, are job ads or job postings, or if you're British, job adverts, which I love that term. I don't know why, it just strikes me. And that's a marketing document. And suddenly, once you realize that's a marketing document, not a legal document, the world opens up to you. If you think of any commercial you've ever seen, they do not, with the exception of pharma, and that's a special monster, and we can talk about that separately. They do not say, here is the tire pressure gauge of this car. Here's how fast it will go. Here's how often you have to change the oil. Those are technical specs that you get in the manual. That's not a commercial. The commercial is you're going to feel good owning this car. People are going to look at you and go, ooh, he or she should feel good about owning that car. I am jealous that they own that car.
Although it's emotion driven. I think it was the Honda Odyssey that said we have the most number of cup holders.
Yeah.
They're kind of making light of it, right?
Well, let's be fair. That every truck ad you see is a fight between, do you care about more torque or do you care about more horsepower? And you're like, right. Aren't they the same thing? And you're like, no, there are differentiations that are so small that only engineers understand. But yet somehow we're going to say this is a Ram and this is a whatever the hell it is, whatever. But you'll notice every one of those commercials is about emotion. You're a rugged man. You're going to tow this family up a mountain, and then you're going to haul this big cement block to go fix a thing. It's emotion driven. Now look at your job posting. Is there any emotion in that thing at all? No. Nope. And that's the problem, is that if you don't see it as a marketing document, you think it's okay to take the document that legal and HR gave you and said, okay, I just copy and I just paste into my ITS and say send. And that's what that is. And that's why they're horrible. Now, there are some very, 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 very smart people. Katrina Kibben, who is my favorite at this, who is a true copywriter and said, what if you took a copywriter brain and applied it to a job posting and said, what is this job really about? She has some great tricks, and I'm gonna reveal one. I think it's pretty public. I don't think I'm revealing the magician's secret here. Like
she's everywhere on LinkedIn.
She's everywhere. She's fantastic, but she is so great at this thing. She's so good. I take all my cues from her, hands down. And really, half of it is about asking better questions. Because right now, most recruiters in HR, well, first off, let's take 2 steps back. In any organization, who's in charge of writing the job posting? Nobody. It's like that Spider-Man meme where everybody's like,
well, usually they buy templates off of the CRM or ATS that they bought. So.
And then they expect HR to kind of go through them, and HR is like, I don't know anything about this job. And they hand it to the hiring manager. The hiring manager goes, I'm too busy for this. And they hand it to the recruiter. The recruiter goes, great, I got it, done, next. And so it's just crap. It's just total junk. But you do it better by asking better questions. Instead of saying, what is this job? Which is, how many calls will you make every day? The question is, what did the person who's going to be successful in this role do to prepare for this role? You ask a hiring manager that, like, the heavens will just part, and the sun and the bird, there'll be a little bird flying by. It'll be great. There'll be a little rainbow towards the end. The hiring manager goes, oh, well, they need to have done this, and they need to have built this, and I really would be helpful. They blah, 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 blah. Great. By the way, did college experience come into that? No. So take college education off here from one of your job postings, please, for the love of everything that's holy. Anyway, that's a small, tiny little soapbox, but I'll put it out. Okay, moving back. You ask better questions, you get better job postings. Now, you don't need to be a copywriter to make amazing job postings. Actually, you do. You probably need to be a copywriter, but don't have to be a copywriter to make really good job postings, right? The upper echelon handfuls of copywriters, Mitch Sullivan, it's also unbelievably good at this job. That's reserved for the gods among men and women here. For the rest of us, just ask better questions. What's really going on? Why would anyone want this job? Ask the question of, hey, let's pretend your main competitor is Facebook. Why would someone take your version of this job instead of the exact same job at Facebook? Because spoiler, that job exists. Get them to answer that, because otherwise they're just going to say, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. Now I want you to do this. Now, the interesting problem with that is every time a hiring manager asks what you want that person to do, they always answer the question this way. I want them to do this. I want them to do this. I want them to do this. What is the same about those answers? It starts with the I. Wrong. It's got to be about the candidate. Why would the candidate care about doing this job? If you are someone who likes to do this, if you are driven by these ideas, if you are looking for an environment in which these things happen, that's a infinitely better job posting. It's engaging. It drives motivations. And then once you've kind of cracked that nut a bit and saying, okay, it's not just about what I want because I am the hiring manager and I have all the power, which is jokes now. Okay, now that you said it's about the candidate, now you can start to say, okay, so what is our brand and how do we slip that in to start to say, because the brand is a promise, right? If you get past the EVP, get past the architecture for a minute, and I would nerd out with you about architecture all day long, I assure you. But if you get past all that, a brand is a promise, and an employer brand is a promise to what it would be like to work here. What is that promise? Okay, well, let's just assume we promise that every 2 weeks you get a paycheck, and it's exactly what we told you it would be. Great. Let's just assume that, because if you don't, that's called felony fraud. Anyway, yeah, whatever. Don't minor thing. Anyway, but if you say this is a place where you have lots of room to run, and then you show up and you don't, your boss is a micromanaging jerk. Well, that's a problem. What you promised doesn't measure reality. So you have to accurately say, what do I promise? And that's why getting into the microculture of each locale is important to say, okay.
Can you imagine a job description says, hey, we micromanage you on a daily basis by
now, hold on.
tracking how many phone calls?
No, hold on. You say that as if it's crazy town, but there's going to be a way to spin it, because I believe that every single job has someone for whom they
Numbers matter, right?
I want that. It's not even matter. Maybe it's structure.
Data driven.
Look, I'm the sort of person, and I get the sense that you are, that you walk in every morning and say, how do I create value? And some days you go, I'm making a video. And some days you go, I'm making a website. Some days you go, I'm taking a nap. And you don't know how you're creating that value. And there are people who I am not, and I don't think you are, who go, it would be really helpful if I knew what was happening at 8:05 today. And then what was happening at 8:10 and what was happening. I need some structure, because a job with structure comes with another. And this is where this is what the job of unpacking these jobs are. The job of structure has a side benefit, which is, and at 5 o'clock, when you check out, you don't have to think about that job anymore. That job is done. And there are people for whom they would love to just stop at 5 and not have to take the stress and the worry of, did I do enough home with them? They want to work at a post office. They want to work as a teller in a bank. They want to do these things where they go, once I clock out, I'm out of there. I'm going to go drink beer or write poetry about beer or whatever the heck I'm going to do with the rest of my life. They're driven by those things. They're not driven by the micromanagement, but the micromanagement is a symptom of, this is a job about structure and about detail. And some people actually really like that. So if you can describe it in terms of, this is a very highly structured job, there's not a lot of room for you to kind of interpret what's going on. However, we've done all the work for you. All you have to do is follow the leader. You and I would hate that job, but I guarantee you there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who go, yep, I'll take that job.
Yeah, I can tell. I don't have a switch that says, okay, it is now, 11 p.m. I need to turn off the
I can't
branding,
stop.
recruitment
You
marketing
can't
brain.
stop. You own your butt. Yeah, if you own your business,
nurses,
you own your brand. Oh yeah.
Nurses they're nursing, right? They can turn it off to a certain extent just by leaving the hospital or doctor's office, wherever.
Exactly.
Right, so 2022 is right around the corner.
Oh God.
We're almost into October, right?
I know, it's terrifying.
So most people start working on their goals in Q4 and some of the roadmaps. What's one of the big goals that you have for either you or your organization for the next 6-12 months?
Well, I got lucky. I'm in a position now where I'm imminently launching a new platform, a new web platform for my day job. And I'm going to spend the next year and a half doing nothing but spending 4 hours a day staring at it going, how do I make this better? Do I put a video here? Do I make this banner better? Can I change that graphic? Can I rewrite that text to be more connected to the brand? Can I do this? You know what we need? We need a calendar for all our university events, but all our speaking events, so that's right there on the career site. And I'm going to spend a year and a half just kind of building this thing. It's like you've given me a foundation and they said, okay, what kind of house do you want? I'm like, I'm going to build like a crazy person. That to me is exciting. But that's me. And everybody's going to come at it different. And I think, the thing about employer brand, the thing I love about employer brand is everybody kind of comes to it differently. I wrote an article with some people over Talent Brand Alliance. We came up with 16 competencies of what it takes to be good at employer branding. And we're like, well, looking at this list, we're going, well, it would be literally impossible for any human being to be good at all of them. Frankly, it would be impossible for most human beings to be good at many of them, or even to know all of them, right? Just simple, basic understandings of both the mechanics of how you launch an ad, the mechanics of how you build a website, the mechanics of building a video, the mechanics of stakeholder management and project management, the mechanics of building advocacy inside a large organization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is insane. If not, there is no one brain that can do that. So what you end up realizing is that if no one can be good at all of them, that means everybody comes in being good with some of them. So there are some people who are storyteller brand people, and there are some people who are political brand people. I have someone I know who I will not name because I won't embarrass her, but while she and I are like so radically different at what we do, we are both good employer branders, but I come from a story content side. She comes from how do I move the politics of the organization to embrace this idea? These things have no bearing on each other. And yet somehow we both end up in the same spot, doing the same kind of work, driving the same kind of values, which means people in employer brand can come in from almost any kind of walk of life and say, if I bring these skills to the table, how do I apply those skills to this idea and then slowly grow my skills? So maybe you're a video person, maybe you're a politics person, maybe you're a software management person, maybe you're a platform person. Whatever the answer is, then do that thing. Employer brand is about saying, what are the skills available, maximize them, and then grow them. That's really what employer branding ends up being on a day-to-day basis anyway.
So obviously, as a digital marketer and a current employer branding practitioner, you've seen lots of campaigns, you've put campaigns together, you've driven candidate flow, engaged candidates in various forms. You mentioned video before. Can you tell us about one of your more successful campaigns, either past or present?
And I try not to think about it as campaigns. I come from a marketing side, but campaigns seem to me always seemed kind of artificial. They seem very agency focused, right? The agency, you come to the agency and say, I need to sell X number of widgets in this quarter. Okay, great. We need to figure out who the audience is. We need to build a campaign. We need to build a creative around that campaign. We need to launch it. We need to measure it. Did it do its job? Great. Do it again. Excellent. It's very much about putting boxes around what this is. And if you're selling widgets, if you're selling cars, if you're selling tacos, that makes perfect sense.
Aren't you selling jobs though?
Am I? Because I don't like to think I am. I think First off, the problem with applying a I'm selling jobs mentality is that it assumes, much like tacos or cars, there's a functionally unlimited number of tacos and cars, right? If I wanted to buy a car, I go out, I buy a car. Somebody's going to make a new one. Done, right? There's not like, oh God, there's only one car. There's lots of cars. There's lots of tacos. There's lots of toothbrushes. There's lots of these things. And sales and marketing in that space is all about more. How do I sell more things? How do I get more share of wallet? How do I get more impressions? How do I get more leads? More. I'm in a world where I got that one job and I need to find the best person for it. I don't need just someone with the paycheck. I don't need someone who just wants to do the job. I want someone who wants that job, which means I'm going from a more quantity level to a quality better level, which is a wholly different way of looking at it. And I'm not 100%.
This is your haystack theory, right?
Yeah. This idea that,
right?
look, I mean, recruiters are so focused and been trained on saying, how do I get 100 people to apply for a job? Because they assume if I get a big enough haystack, a needle will happen. And right. I don't think that's the way to go. I think that made sense 20 years ago, but now, when you're not just sending blind resumes in the news, in the mail to newspaper ads from Sunday, which I was old enough to remember having done myself. It was terrifying. They didn't even list the company names. It's a PO box. Great. Here, have my personal information. This makes perfect sense. What could go wrong? And you do it every Sunday because you're hungry. The job now of recruiting is more about, I have one job. How do I find the one person I would hire? And frankly, if I find two, it makes the hiring manager feel really good to say yes to this person and no to this person. Anything beyond that is literally wasted energy. Why bother screening that person that's never going to get the job? Why bother reading that resume if they don't have the skill set? Why bother doing all this rigmarole?
Well, I mean, there are some compliance issues why you have to go through the resumes, right?
You have to. Applied. But that's the question. If they apply, yes, you do. And I completely agree that. But
how do you get them to not apply if they're not qualified?
Right.
Is the question.
Well,
and it's all about, you kind of went in on your book, Talent That Chooses You, about, you kind of summarized this, but I'm going to expand it for the audience because they may not have read your book, right? Rather than building a big haystack and then hoping you can find the needle in that haystack or the great candidate, what most companies do is they throw more hay on that haystack, hoping that more needles are going to be in there somewhere, right? Yeah. Build a bigger haystack, and they keep throwing more and more hay on there, hoping that a needle or two are going to pop out the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Do you still? I still see a ton of that happening in the market.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a that hasn't changed in the last 30 years.
And I would call it standard operating procedure for recruiting.
Yeah, that's the whole point of job descriptions, is to build the haystack, right? But
which is why they're broken, which is why they're flawed.
Which is why they're broken to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So how do you change that though, right? But because there's a massive shift, especially since COVID, everything's remote, or majority of it is remote now.
Yeah.
Everybody's used to working from home, although some people don't like it, blah, blah, blah. And there's this big thing. I'm not going to get into that portion, but
thank you.
There is a massive gap in the marketplace, which is going to continue to expand now that we have 6 million people, 7 million people retiring every year, baby boomers, and there's a big gap at the bottom, not enough millennials and Gen Zers to fill those, and not enough Gen Xers like myself to kind of fill the gaps from an experience level. So how do you fill that, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't throw more needles. You can't find more needles.
You can't
make. There are no more needles.
You can sort of manufacture them, but the act of putting hay does not create a needle, right? It's this large, it's casting the widest possible net and hoping you actually catch the fish you want to catch. Well, what happens is you accidentally catch some dolphins, and that's a bad idea. The problem is it's all based on this idea that the owner of the job, i.e. the hiring manager, has all the power, which is not true. It's not even remotely true. It's about the candidate really has all the power, and they've always have had the power. They just didn't realize it because they're the one driving value. They're the ones who do the work and create the value for the company. And therefore, they're the ones who reward it. Anyway, and let's just go ahead and open up, if we're talking about COVID and remote, this idea that all you have to do is find the person you want And it's okay to hack off 99 people for whom you will send a form letter saying thanks, but no thanks, and assume that that's fine. And that doesn't
6
create
months after they applied.
Exactly. And assume that doesn't create ill will, and assume that doesn't create bad karma, and assume that those 99 people don't absolutely talk to each other and talk to everybody else about how horrible experience you are. And you wonder why it's so hard to find people. It's like, oh, because it's in a world of there's always more fish in the sea. You've pissed off every fish. What the hell? Yeah. So that's where employer branding.
You made a toxic environment for the fish.
Totally did. And then, let's get into this idea that, well, actually, I'm gonna leave the rest of that behind. I think, trust me, again, I could do an hour on that easily. The trick is, and I equate it, I know it's kind of an old saw to talk about recruiting as dating, right? This idea that it's a lot like dating. It's about finding this match, and that's great. I think too much of recruiting has over-optimized on the dating aspect of recruiting and not the marriage aspect of recruiting. It's like, look at Tinder. Tinder made it super easy to say,
the sourcing part.
No. Beyond sourcing, I take it another half a step forward and say, it's the expectation that you should have 100 dates before you find Prince or Princess Charming, right? This idea that you have to have 100 candidates, that you expect to do that, and it's completely normal. But all the tools are functionally around how quickly can you create a haystack of 1,000 or 100 or whatever? How quickly can you sort? How quickly can you stack rank? It's about how do you create the maximum number of good dates? And I say, it's not really about that. It's really about, because I've dated a lot and I've gotten married a couple more than once. And so I know that process are radically different. And I have friends of mine who are really good at dating. They're always good about finding that next date, finding that next person, and it's just boom, boom, boom. It's become a muscle they build. Can they commit to a person? No. They are not built for marriage. The truth is that when you're hiring, it is a marriage. You're expecting to partner with this person for a good deal of time. You're expecting them to be, that their goals and your goals should align, that you should actually reward each other's motivations. And too often we're applying dating rules to a marriage conversation. And to me, that makes no sense at all. So what you should be doing is say, look, it's not about how do I date as many people. It's about saying, I only want to date 2 or 3 people, but one of them, frankly, all of them should be good enough to get the job. How do you change that? And it's not about how do I put my job on a job board, and frankly, every job board. How do I make my job so attractive?
Aren't going to be able to say 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Usually, I mean, they've got to go through 50, 100 candidates to get to 3.
Do they? Look, let's change it.
There's not too many jobs out there where it's not a 10-to-1 ratio. The ratio has been around since,
But that's a function of, look, if you build tools that collect resumes, don't be surprised when you have a lot of resumes. The tool should be about saying, look,
exactly.
hold on.
The text-based job description, though, does not give the candidate enough information to determine whether or not they're even qualified for the job, yet alone interested in the job. So if you
take it 2 more steps,
crap in, you're going to get crap out.
Take it 2 more steps. I completely agree with that. Now, put in a line that says why you're not going to like this job. Put in a paragraph that says the kind of people who will be happiest here are like this. The problem is job postings.
Get it out of text and put it in the video and record your intake meetings with a hiring manager.
I buy that too completely. But that's the idea. Job postings are designed to be as scary free as possible. They're designed to be as positive as possible. No negative, no rough edges. It's all about we're a great place to work. For whom? We're a wonderful place to work. I don't understand. We're hiring lots of people. What does that matter to me? The job posting is written to say, how do I get 100 candidates? It's not written for how do I get 2 potential hires. And if you think about who is the person I want to hire, write that job. Then the 99 people who be like, I really don't want to do that. They don't apply. And suddenly you've turned a 50 or 100 applicant pile into about a 50 or a 40 or a 30. And then first off, you're saving yourself a ton of time. But second off, the people who do show up, they're like, oh, that was more interesting than your average job posting. They're more engaged. They understand. They're more likely to have done the research about your company. They're more likely to understand what they're in for. They're not walking in blind, which means the interviews are better, which means the hires are better. There's data on that all over the place, but we all seem to choose to ignore it because it's deviating from the standard procedure of how do I put this job out to as many people as possible.
Exactly. In my agency, we do things called career webinars, right? We get the hiring manager, we're basically doing an intake meeting. And the whole point of the intake meeting that we're doing, or the career webinar that we're recording, is we're trying to discover why a candidate would want to come work for this company, this department, this hiring manager, what's different about it, etc. We talk a little bit about minimum skill sets, but honestly, I don't really care if we talk about minimum skill sets at all because that's in the job description.
Exactly.
I want to get to the bottom line. And invariably, at the end of it, either the recruiter who listens to it afterwards or the hiring manager who listens to it says, how many candidates do you think are going to apply off of this? I'm like, I'm hoping as few as possible.
Yes.
And they're like, Jeff, we need hundreds of candidates. No, you don't, right? And I'm trying to change that paradigm.
Yes.
Saying, so look, you don't need 50 candidates. You may need 50 candidates to watch the video, but you don't need 50 candidates to apply afterwards. Correct. Well, what's our application rate? I don't care. I want it to be higher quality, not higher quantity.
Yeah, if you want people to apply,
if 3 candidates or even 5 candidates apply to this thing after watching that video,
they're great.
When we are telling the real story of what it's like to work here, as opposed to watching, having 50 candidates read the job description and then apply, that's what it's about.
And that's a tough sell, right? To a hiring manager who's been trained and to a recruiter who's been trained that it's all about maximum filling the top of the funnel, right? They've been told that.
Recruitment marketing is about driving traffic.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if that talent is qualified in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a chicken suit on the side of the road that says apply here. It's all bodies.
Right.
So one of the ways you can change that conversation in your benefit is to change the timeline. Instead of saying, I'm going to put a job out there, video, job posting, don't care, billboard, who cares? And I'm going to wait 2 weeks to see what I catch. And that's very much a dragnet kind of situation. What if you said, I don't have a job yet, but I want to start telling my story. And I'm going to create an opportunity for candidates to go, that's an interesting story. I want to learn more. To jump in and just say, I'm kind of vaguely interested. Keep talking, right? You haven't turned me off. I'm not looking for a job. I'm very happy where I am. And I don't know when I'll be looking for a job, but please keep telling my story. You can automate this stuff. Then the real light switch turns on when the hiring manager shows up and says, okay, what I need is a person who does this, 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 this. And the recruiter says, hold on, opens up the sourcing tool of people who have signed in. They've collected information. They've actually seen the resume. They've seen the LinkedIn and they know who these people are. And they say, do you want to talk to 3 people next week who sound like exactly that person? How do you do that? I haven't had to kind of fill a funnel. I didn't wait for you. I built relationships in anticipation that one day these people would be great fits. That is when the light turns on. When it's not about, I'll see you in a month when I've sorted, when I've collected resumes and sorted and phone screened, and I'll bring you a handful when I can.
It's about Shangri-La. That's the piece de resistance. That's what we're looking for. Peak of the pyramid there.
And even if that only happens 1 out of 10 recs, you will
make a huge difference.
It's a 10% drop in time to fill. And I know plenty of CHROs who'd be like, I get a raise when I do that. That's a huge raise. That's a bonus kind of situation. These are not massive changes. It's about smartly applying what we all know to be true, right? And what I described, every headhunter in the world goes, that's what I do every day. Yeah, why is recruiting different from headhunting and executive recruiting? Why are these things so different? Because it's scale. No, change the conversation. Collect resumes, get people pre-sold in what you're about, which means positives and negatives, right? Get them to say, oh, I don't want that. That's not my kind of company. Got to go buy. Great. That means the people who stay engaged are ready to go. And when that recruiter says, hey, I know I have been talking for a while. I finally found the perfect thing. I want to get you to the hiring manager. Can you meet next week? The answer will be yes. That's where you want to be.
Yep. So you mentioned this a little bit earlier. Activity over outcomes. I think that most recruiters are measured by activity, especially corporate recruiters are measured by activity, not outcome, right? And you also mentioned a couple of things about campaigns and stories. So what are 3 stories that every employer branding or recruitment marketing team needs to have out in that marketplace?
Okay, that's a good way to frame this sort of idea. First off, you do need to talk about the kind of person who's going to be happy here. Some people are driven by stability. Some people are driven by safety. Some people are driven by risk. Some people are driven by status. The reason why Goldman Sachs gets all the applicants it ever wants, even though it works those people to death and makes the newspaper the level which they work, is because they say, work here and you're a millionaire. That's the promise they make, the employer brand promise. Work here, you'll never fly coach again. Simple as that. And they beef it up and they bolster it and they validate it 7,000 different ways. So what is the reason someone would be happy here? Who is that person? Understand that audience. If you're talking about programmers, are you talking about not the technical skills of do they do front end, or they do back end, or they full stack, blah, 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 blah. It's about, are they looking to launch a project? Are they looking to be a team player? That is a very big question. It seems so small, but it's so big. Are they the kind of people who launch it, even though they know it's not quite ready, but they're going to, hang by their fingernails to get this thing done and push it out the door at a crazy timeline? There are people who live for that kind of adrenaline rush. And there are people who say, give me a schedule. What's this agile nonsense? Give me a waterfall. Tell me when these things are due. I want to know what I'm doing for the next 3 years, let alone next 3 days. I want planning. That's a different developer. Your organization loves one of those, hates the other, but you don't do a good job describing what the difference. You don't say, look, we're a kind of place that it's a run and gun. We ship it when it's barely nascently ready. Go, 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 go. And people are like, some people will say, that sounds terrifying. They're never going to apply. Congratulations. You just cut your audience in half. So understanding who you're looking for based on what you offer, that kind of connection. That is okay.
I had to pop that bubble. I had to push that button.
I hate that word. And I know there are people.
That's why I said it, James. I've read up on you.
I know, clearly. Look, personas, much like, you've been in brainstorming sessions when they bring in an outsider and they run a SWOT. They run a SWOT analysis. And I've done 20 of these, and 19 of those times you end up exactly where you expected to land up. You do exactly what you expected because the person who's designing that process just read a book and just walked through the process. The one time I went, how did we end up here? Oh, wow. Suddenly the lights are turned on. That was someone who is a practitioner of the art of getting people to think differently.
Innovation is very, very difficult.
It's very difficult.
Do not understand how difficult innovation and really coming up with a new innovative idea is.
Yes. Now, that same idea gets applied to personas. 99 times out of 100, someone read an article on HubSpot about designing personas, and they just do the exercise and they landed up with exactly who you think they landed on. Or they take the persona and they come with the campaign. I saw this. I was at a conference and 10 groups broke up and they were given the exact same persona description, which was weak, but whatever, but standard, but totally by what you'd expect. And we said, design a campaign for this audience. Of the 10 audiences, I got 8 of the same campaigns. Mm-hmm. It's a woman. Let's go talk magazines. That is the most thin thinking in the world. I don't know any women who read magazines, and I know a lot of women, and they're incredibly smart, and they're not there reading magazines. But because we generalize and paint with a big brush, we think, that's because you're using this idea of how do I reach 10,000 women? Well, what's the only channel that I know will reach mostly women and it's nice and big? Well, magazines, except the women who read magazines may not be who you're actually looking to talk to. You end up using personas to come up with the exact same solutions to the exact same problems over and over and over again. Every once in a while, a persona comes down the pipe and you're like, that's forcing me to think differently. And usually it's because it got so specific, it got beyond the banalities of demographics, it got beyond the banalities of experience and started to talk about mindset. It started to talk about, give me a disc analysis of the person you want to hire. That sounds interesting. Give me, Myers-Briggs, not so much, but give me a strengths finder on that audience. Who do you want me to talk to? Get me something more. There's a great example of, it's 2 people. They have the exact same age. They come from the exact same country. They have almost the exact same kind of upbringing. They have the exact same kind of, they're both internationally known. One is Prince Charles and one is Ozzy Osbourne. How in the hell are they in the same persona? But the way most people write personas, that's the same person. No, that's the problem. It's too broad, too broadly painted. So to me, it's about what are you getting? Get beyond the demographic. Get beyond it's a woman. It is someone who likes to build, someone who likes to support, someone who likes to be off on their own, someone who works better communally and as a team. Make me understand that this is a job where someone has to stand up in front of the CEO and probably say, no, and let me tell you why. Because that is a radically different person than the person who says, yes, sir, what do you want more, sir? Those are different people. And each job demands different mentalities and different perspectives, but we completely ignore that in most personas. Bring that stuff in, I'll talk to you about that. But for right now, personas suck. But that's where the stuff is. That's where the meat of it is.
There's a concept in design thinking, and I've given probably about 100 or so design thinking sessions, right? Moderated them and been a part of them. Yep. But you have to discover what the user's pain is, right?
Yeah.
You don't uncover that pain. And what I find is that most people are going to scratch off the surface pain. The application process sucks. Well, yeah, that's not the real pain, right?
Yeah.
And you have to scratch a little bit deeper until you get to where you're a crying puddle on the floor pain.
Yeah.
That's the problem you need to solve.
Emotional pain, not functional pain.
You have to solve that absolutely base foundational human pain if you're going to fix your recruiting or your candidate experience, your recruiting process. And most companies, most organizations that I've seen aren't willing to scratch that deep. They just aren't willing to ask those questions, right? Maybe they don't even know what questions, but it takes a long time to get to that.
But like, look at the example of, I did this in a previous job. I won't name names because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but we flipped their offer acceptance rate from the 40s to the 60s by simply saying and asking ourselves, why would this person take this job? How does taking this job make their life better? Because, by the way, that is the only question in your candidate's mind when you hand them the offer letter. You may think they're looking at that number. You may think they're calculating the percentage of bonus relative to equity, relative to whatever. No, what they're only asking themselves, even if they know it when they mostly don't, is how does this make my life better? Now, if when you slide that offer letter across the virtual table and you have a little paragraph or you have hey, I just want to remind you, the reason why we think you should take this job is reinforce, connect the dot. The reason why they showed up in the first place wasn't because you had a job, because everybody has jobs. The reason they showed up and the reason they applied and the reason they showed up to every interview and answered every dumbass question your interviewers asked them is because they could see potentially, maybe if they squint hard enough, how this could make their life better. This is the time in which you ram it home and you say, this is how you make your life better. You do that, your offer acceptance rate.
Recruiters do, right?
They do. And that's the trick, but they don't teach that. They teach facilitation. Let's go buy some software that makes calendaring a little easier. Let's go figure out how to get more applicants. Let's figure out how to sort order stuff. The closing, it's a magical skill, but it comes down to, but that's about, the pain is, why would I take this offer if I can't be certain that it's going to make my life better?
Well,
that's the pain that's underlying all that.
It's really difficult to close a candidate except on salary and compensation if you don't have a relationship with that candidate and that hiring manager, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that relationship, you don't know what buttons to push to make it close, right?
Yeah.
Right, so go ahead.
So, because what's happening there is every job offers both objective and subjective values, right? Mm-hmm. The objective value is number on the paper, bonus, structure of equity, the stuff that you write down and put on the offer letter. And the reason why everybody gets hung up on that is because no one believes the other parts. It's a great place to work. It's a great opportunity. Your boss is super, super into your development. These are subjective values, and subjective because they're not real. Nothing is true. And so if you're recruiting and if you're employer branding, you understand that as my company, it offers this kind of objective value and this kind of subjective value. How do you describe and prove the subjective values such that it overcomes potential limitations on the objective values? Why does someone become a teacher? Who says, you know what, I definitely want a 40% pay cut to get screamed at by 12-year-olds all day? That sounds like fun. No one says that. What they say is, I'm here to help children become adults. The subjective value of how it's going to make me feel at the end of the year, knowing that I did that job, far outweighs the crappy pay and the crappy work style. How do you take that same proof that I know that when I join your company, you're going to give me these things? It's not just some junk the recruiter's spouting. It's not just some crap on a website. It is real, that is harder to do. And the more you invest in telling the subjective value story, the less your objective value matters. So if you're a company that's not paying Facebook and Google level wages, which by the way, unless you're Facebook and Google, you're not, how do you compete with that? You say, this is what we offer that Google doesn't. This is what we offer that Facebook doesn't. And you have to prove it. Otherwise, it's just a game of numbers and you're going to lose that game every single time.
All right, I'm going to list a couple of items and I want you to put them in order of priority. All right.
Okay.
Job distribution, content creation, messaging, employer brand strategy.
Okay. I think of them not so much as in priority, but in sort of kind of planning.
Nope. I want it in priority, not in like a sequential order in which you do it. Priority.
You can.
Content creation, messaging, employer brand strategy, distribution.
You can do good content creation without an employer brand strategy. You can do it. It's harder. It's harder. You end up wasting energy on stuff that doesn't matter. You end up spreading yourself too thin. You end up listening to hiring managers say, what about the story about this? And what about, and you end up kind of all over the map instead of realizing, how do I focus it? How do I bring it into alignment and create, this is what's going on. Okay. So you don't need an employer value proposition or a strategy. I think you should have a shared sense of brand position, which is a fuzzier term. Let's just call it, what is the brand promise? What do we promise people when they work here? If we can all kind of agree on that, and it doesn't have to be a deck and it doesn't have to be a lot of research, we can simply all say, look, when you get here, this is what we promise you and here's how we prove it. Great. So to me, the content strategy is probably the most important. The messaging is kind of an offshoot of that. If you have content and you don't know how to get it to the right people and how to engage it, and then how to kind of tie it together and say, I shared this piece of content with you. Bye. That's didn't do you any good. If you share it, what's the next step? How do you get the, how do you drive it to a CRM? How do you drive it to let's be fair, the spreadsheet that every recruiter keeps of their candidates, they keep in their back pocket all the time. Every single one of you does it. Don't lie to me that you do. Anyway, how do you connect that spark of interest based on the piece of the content, that story you told, into something semi-actionable, even if the tail on that thing is long as your arm, even it's going to be 2 years before that person gets a job here. How do you take that spark and kind of feed it a little bit of cotton to kind of keep it warm? Then employer, go ahead.
Content creation, you're saying, is number one?
Number one, probably messaging right after that.
And messaging, content creation, messaging, and then distribution.
Distribution,
then employer brand strategy.
I go distribution last. I think if you do the other pieces right, the distribution. Look, I talked to Target years and years and years ago. In fact, all the people I know who worked at Target at the time probably aren't even there anymore. That's how long ago it was. And they talked about, we need more people to apply. I said, the problem isn't that you need more people to apply. The problem isn't how do you make the apply button bigger. The problem is if you took the apply button away, the people you wanted would find a way to get you their resume. Your target, right? No one doesn't know who you are. The trick is you just haven't done a great job extending that promise beyond we're a good place to shop. The reason people want to work for you is because they like shopping there. Connect that dot. It's not making the apply button any bigger. To me, the distribution takes care of itself. If I'm in love with a company, you don't have to worry about it. I'm going to go find a recruiter. I'm going to go make friends with someone who does that job at that company. I'm going to dig my claws into that company. You don't need to feed it to me. That's really how I think about it.
Okay.
And honestly,
I would disagree. I would say that content creation is probably the most important. Messaging is, distribution is third. Employer brand strategy, it's nice to have, but I don't think you need to have it.
Independent on how
you have it, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if I had to prioritize, if I were coming in and the company had nothing, I would focus on content creation first. And that's where I think most companies fail is they think the only content they need to create is job descriptions. And nothing could be further than the truth. That was true when we had tons of hay and tons of needles, but there's not a whole lot of needles now. And the only way to attract those needles to have more magnets, and that's why they call them lead magnets, right? Is through content creation. The lower amount of content that you create, the fewer times that you have to attract those candidates.
The mistake.
You need to be constantly creating content.
And the mistake that most people make, and it's the one that I come kind of from a content marketing world, that's kind of where I cut my teeth in marketing. It's this idea that if you say it once, you assume the world heard it. And that's not even remotely true. You have to say it over and over in different ways, in different languages, in different audiences, in different functions, different channels, in different formats. And to you, it's like, I am banging this drum, I am beating this dead horse. It's like, no. You are in the job of reaching audiences who do not pay attention to you naturally. And by the way, if they did, you wouldn't have to reach them anyway. So this is actually the job.
Yeah, I've got about another 50 questions, and I only have another 4 or 5 minutes of the podcast here, or the video cast, whatever you want to call this. But what's most important to you? Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel? 30 seconds.
I hate funnels. It's like, look, if you know what you offer and you know what that promise is and you express it properly, it is about creating desire for what you offer. And when you create desire, you change kind of the shape of what you do. Think of the next iPhone that's going to come out. People are going to line up for that iPhone. They have desire for that iPhone. So if you can think about what you're about is creating desire for a thing, instead of saying, I'm going to beg people to apply. I'm going to make it so easy to apply that my dog could apply. The paw just hits the apply button and eventually hits LinkedIn, and then you apply. It's not about making it easier and simple. It's not about filling the funnel. It's about saying, I want people to desire what I have in such a way that we find that match. So it's not about funnels. It's about connection. That's just how I approach it. Now, I know I'm on the wild side of that world. I am on the edge, and I'm pushing a boundary that most recruiters would find very uncomfortable. But
it's tough to measure your side, right?
100%. 100%.
It's easier to measure funnels, right?
But if you do what I do, it actually ends up supporting your entire funnel. That's the trick. It's like, it's not mutually exclusive. You do it this way. You can take my weird little path, or you can say, integrate this thinking into what you already do. It inherently adds value to what you're doing.
So in marketing, there's a thing called a call to action, obviously very important. There's also a thing called, what is your offer? And that's also very important. Yep. In recruiting, those kind of equate to an apply now, right? Yep. Which is your call to action. Besides the salary or some kind of compensation, what's the offer that companies should be making to candidates?
Yeah, that's the, look, everybody knows they need a job. Everybody wants a job.
Come work here because I'm going to give you a paycheck.
Yeah,
okay.
Everybody has that. Yeah. But not only that, they know where the jobs are. They know how to apply for a job. There are no secrets in this process. There are no hidden diamonds anywhere. The question is, beyond the paycheck, it is, what is that subjective value? What are you offering that another company might not offer? And I'm in a world where I'm competing with these massive companies and we are not massive. And so how do you say, and I'm just going to use Google as an example here. Look, Google is the best Google that could ever be. I cannot out Google, but Google cannot out me. So what is the thing that I do better than Google? And you're thinking, how could that possibly be? It's like, well, being a smaller company, I can think of lots of things. It's not something that is inherently universally natural that everybody wants, but the audience that cares about shipping on a regular basis, knowing that their fingerprints are on devices and machines and code and stuff that get to the real world, they're not necessarily going to get that at Facebook's and Google's, right? Those are massive companies. There's a massive number of people coding that may not ever ship anything. They're there for a different motivation. So what is the thing that you offer that only you can offer, that you offer better than your competition? Tell that story. That is the meat of, there's a paycheck. Yeah, there's probably healthcare involved because this is America and that's apparently how we do things these days. There's the stuff that you expect. Baseline it. We all know that. And frankly, thanks to Glassdoor and a couple other places, salaries aren't even that different, right? They're all kind of banded together. If you're a PM, they're generally expecting salaries, whether you work at a hospital, a bank, or at Google. They're not too far off. So it's not about the money. What is it about that? Get beyond the money, get beyond the objective value and think of what is my subjective value that I'm offering somebody. That's what you're offering.
So how do you quantify that for candidates? What candidates, besides the why, right? What questions do candidates want answered before they can make a viable decision on whether or not they want to work for a company?
I still, and I know this is straight up 10th grade health class speaking, but I still go to Maslow's hierarchy. If I can do the job, I'd love the job, but it's in Japan and I have to be local, I can't do that job. So there is that kind of base level. Do I have the skills to do that job? Is this job in a place? Yeah.
Skill
So
set.
skill sets, location. So there's base level stuff. It's the food and water of the job. That still matters, even if it's remote. Then there's the culture of the job. Then there's the what it's like to work here. What's my boss like? What's the day-to-day going to be like? And it leads to, if, for those of you remembering and kind of flashing back to your 10th grade health classes where you learned Maslow's hierarchy the first time, as I did, there's the sense of personal satisfaction. There's that not self-improvement. It's self-awareness.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the apex of what that is. And for a job, it is about self-satisfaction and feeling good about the work you're doing. Now, if you're an employer brand or recruitment marketing, you're trying to say, you will be satisfied here, you're full of crap because you don't know anything. Because that's all as much about, that's about the person reading the sentence, not about the person writing that sentence. But if you structure your messages, if you kind of fill them up with these ideas of this is what's going on, and this is what we do, and this is how we do it, and here's some proof points, and here's some examples from other people, and, you're leading the horse to that space where they say, I can project myself into this company and see how I might find some level of self-satisfaction, some sort of value, some sort of self-esteem in this job. That's the goal. And then the application process kind of starts to prove some of those points.
So you mentioned earlier that you've got a big project coming on. You're launching a new CRM. What are some of the complexities with that? What are some of the biggest challenges? And that's going to be the last question we'll end with.
There are so many complexities. It's very easy, and I've seen it happen, where people launch career sites, job sites, people sites, CRMs, big old kind of like, let's distill it all and put it in one big package kind of situations where it becomes a game of committee, that every team wants its message. Every team goes, you can't say that because it doesn't make me look good. You end up kind of filing off all the edges till it becomes a safe round thing, which is why most career sites are pretty boring, right? Honestly, I think that's why video really helps, because there's in a way that you can kind of judiciously pick the words that you say, and you can kind of dance around in a semi-lawyerly, semi-sales kind of way about the truth of the thing. Video tends to allow people to look beyond the subject. It can see the background a bit more. It can kind of see behind the curtain a bit and say, okay, they're saying this, but the box is showing me more to that it's a lot more information here that I'm getting. So to me, giving that information and making it easy for people to say, look, I know that there are a lot of people who want to kind of edit and kind of control the message, and valid. I get it. You don't say Baba Booey for fun, but the more you can show some of the cracks and the little peeks behind the curtain, the more people go, oh, it's like that. And it feels like proof. So to me, how do you avoid a brand that feels like it could be picked up and drop shipped to any other company and just say, that's our new brand? Because let's be fair, a lot of them could be. And I'm naming no names, but so many feel like that could be any company. How do you do something that's specific to who you are, specific what the company offers, that feels real, that people can touch, that people can say, that's mine, I believe it, internalize it, and actualize it out to the world? I can't even begin to tell you all the challenges. It is political, it is content, it is time, it is resources, it is activation, it is advocacy, it is getting the recruiters to say, this is a cool new tool, I can't wait to use it, including the ones who go, I can't spell CRM, I don't want to use that. And you have to kind of say, okay, how do I show you that there's value here? Because you haven't connected to that yet. You haven't kind of moved to that space. How do I get business leaders to give me the content that I need to tell their story for them that isn't, we're a great place to work, because that's all they're saying, because you have to kind of educate them and extract the data, extract the real meat of what's going on. Millions and millions. I'm just that's the tip of the iceberg of all the challenges there are to do this, but honestly, that's why I and a lot of people who do my job love it, because it is wrangling cats. It is trying to get an orchestra of people who've never met each other, who are going to play the same piece of music on different instruments, but from the first beat. It is very much creating alignment from chaos. And that's a lot of fun for me. So that's kind of what I do. So it's a lot of challenges, and it's hard, but it should be hard, because if it was easy, then you just make a sticker and stick it on your laptop and call it a day.
There you go. Any last thoughts here, James?
You know what? Employer brand is a job for crazy people. And there's a reason why all the employer branders you've ever met are probably completely lunatics. I add myself to that number. And it's because an employer brand is the entire company. right? What the CEO does, what customer service does, what the recruiter does, what the PR team does, what social media does, what the product team does, all of that influences a perception of what people think it's like to work in your company. And here you are, expected to manage all those things. And if you look at it, you realize all those expectations are coming from things that I don't control, but I have to get my paycheck to manage those expectations. Only crazy people say, wait, all these things I'm not responsible for and have no power or authority over, but are actually going to drive how well I can do my job. I want that job. Only crazy people take that job. So if you're a crazy person such as myself, employer branding is an amazing space to be. But again, it's a particular kind of crazy.
Talent acquisition in general is kind of a crazy.
No question.
Employer branding kind of takes it to the next level, and definitely recruitment marketing.
Yeah.
And
I've never met any sane recruiters. They're all nuts, but they're all nuts in a very different way. So, which is why it's great.
James, absolutely fantastic conversation. We could go on for another probably 2 or 3 hours, but I know I've got a day job. You've got a day job. So let's kind of wrap it up. Everybody, thank you so much for joining the inaugural first episode of the 10X Candidate Experience Podcast Videocast Show. James, thank you so much.
Jeff, thanks. It's been a pleasure. I'm so thrilled to be the inaugural guest here at this. So thanks.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.